Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend, Rick from Blind, and today I'm going to introduce you all to Ben Morss, who's a product manager at Zocdoc. Ben earned a bachelor's degree in computer science and music at Harvard, followed by a doctorate in music composition at the University of California, Davis. Blending a life in music with a living in tech, he has worked as a software engineer for companies like the New York Times. He was also previously a product manager at Google in charge of advanced capabilities in the Chrome browser. For those of you that don't know, ZocDoc is the leading healthcare marketplace that aims to help every patient find and book every type of care. Each month, millions of patients use ZocDoc to find quality in network doctors, see their real time availability, and instantly book appointments for in person or virtual care. Thanks for coming on the show, Ben.
Sure. I didn't know it was millions. It's kind of exciting.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know
We'll
this
do
new
billions
company. This
pretty
is what we're doing.
soon. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
It
please. I
kind
mean, you're responsible for growth as a product manager right now. So part of that accomplishment is due to your work. But beyond that, can you walk us through your career?
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to go from millions to billions to trillions of patients pretty soon to quadrillions.
yeah.
But in the land of reality, my career is unusual and maybe complicated, maybe twisty and turny, but it's what I did. So as you were saying before, I did get a computer science degree in college, but somewhere in there, I kind of figured I was actually better at music than at computers, and I got more and more excited about being more of an artist. I'd grown up in a family of scientists, and I liked math and physics, and that was the way that everyone went in our family. But I started to realize I'm kind of good at music in all these ways. Like all the classes here are kind of easy for me. I can analyze music really well. And so I couldn't figure out what to do with myself in college. And I finally decided to finish college, finish the computer science degree, make sure I had this possible like degree for a job someday, then to go off and go to art school and try doing music for a year. I moved to California, and once I got there, I was like, I'm an artist. This is cool. Forget the whole computer thing. And I transitioned from this Harvard graduate in computer science who'd been a Microsoft intern, had this easy career path, to this guy who went to art school, dropped out of art school, spent some years in Berkeley being an activist and playing in punk bands. So a career transition, you might say. And then I missed learning about music, so I went back to graduate school, still playing in rock bands. I moved to Sacramento, California, and I got my doctorate in music composition at UC Davis, as you were saying before. And then I was still into music. I met a girl, we liked each other. We moved to New York together. She was into theater, and we moved to New York, and she got started directing shows in New York, and I started doing musical theater in New York. So again, not doing any computer stuff except for odd jobs here and there to pay the bills. And then I got a job actually as a music professor at a small college called Concordia College in Bronxville, New York. And after a couple of years there, I actually missed being in tech, and the college was having some trouble. It actually folded during COVID. Nice people there, but they just had trouble getting students to show up. So I started working at startups and learned how to program all over again from scratch. By then, I almost couldn't find a job as a programmer anymore because my skills had gotten stale pretty quickly. But I managed to get like a job at a startup part time, and then was still doing music and working part time. And finally, in 2012, decided to actually get a full time job again as a programmer. So that's when I got back into tech full time and made music the sideline instead of the front line. And then a couple years later, was surprised to find myself, I was working at AOL, surprised that recruiters started writing to me from places like Facebook at the time, not Meta back then, and Google, not Alphabet, and asked me to interview. And I had not really thought I could become a programmer at these places, but I also didn't want to program anymore all the time. I liked working with people by this point and being around people. They kept asking recruiters what kind of jobs I had that weren't just like programming jobs. Google had one called a customer solutions engineer. I was working with people in sales to help get the big ad clients solutions they needed to make them happy with their ad experiences and invent things they could do. So I applied for this job. To my surprise, I actually got the job. And to my big surprise, I got a job at Google, where I then transitioned jobs a few different times from customer solutions engineer to ad solutions engineer to a job actually in sales working on mobile sites. I call myself a mobile evangelist, to working as a developer advocate, for a thing called AMP and also for the web in general. From there to a product manager on Chrome, and finally ran out of things to do and got myself a job at Zocdoc a month ago. So that's my job, my life so far. I'm still doing music. You may see behind you possibly some stuff from my music life. This was the attic in our house. It was my little music studio in the attic, and then 2020 it became my everything studio. Like there was like a camera that I got to do videos, and there's a keyboard back there that's currently on the floor and other stuff.
I'm curious, Ben and Rick, is there a connection between music and being like a coder or software developer? Because I haven't seen a lot, but I have seen some people who overlap. Is that unique, or do you see this, Ben, a lot?
I mean, as you know, it's pretty common. Actually, at Google NYC, I kind of ran a group that advocated for more music facilities for Googlers in New York. They had a little music room with a lot of kind of older, donated, broken stuff, and we organized ourselves, got funding for some nice music stuff, and organized various events for Googlers who are into music. Before, I would have told you that for me, the connection was I'm into structures, I guess, and I love the structure in music, and also the structure in computer code and other kinds of things I'm into, like linguistics or history. But then I realized at some point that music, for most people, isn't really about structure, it's about emotions and about cultural meaning. So I'm working very hard on understanding that better because I've got a math brain. So for me, it was the math and music that excited me, not the music in music. But for whatever reason, a lot of folks do end up playing instruments or writing some music who are coders, and also vice versa.
You see a lot of that, Rick, on your platform? Because I don't see people talking about it, but I guess it's a thing, huh?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, to Ben's point, there seems to be a natural kind of affinity in terms of like math and composing. They're I would say they're both different languages, right? So from music to actual code, and perhaps there's a parallel there.
You can enjoy the details and the superstructure in both kinds of things. I can say maybe actually thinking about it more just now, it may be more that there are computer programmers who play music, but few who do other kinds of things that are even more human oriented. I knew very few actors, for example, who are coders. There are some. I knew very few dancers. There are some. Those things that are really especially human oriented are poets. I didn't see that quite as much. The music, playing the piano or playing the guitar, that you could do.
All right. You know what? As you're talking about guitar and dancing, what have you, I want to go back to this thing. What did your parents say? If you don't mind my asking, when you said, you know what, I'm not going to be a coder and I'm just going to be a punk rocker. Like, was that a warm embrace and you're like, oh, I'm so happy for you? Or were
They
they like,
said,
what are you doing? What's
wonderful,
wrong with
wonderful,
you?
son. We're so proud of you. No, they didn't. They didn't see computers as a good idea either because at the time I was into computers, it wasn't the most common job. They thought I should be doing math and science, which I also very much liked. But yeah, they hated that I got into like playing in bands, and they still don't really understand what I'm doing with that.
Did they give you lectures like, what are you doing with your life? Where are you going to go with this?
Yeah, pretty much. They thought I was just lost to them basically because my hair got long and I wore a lot of unusual clothing. And I was at this strange art school full of other freaky people. Then not an art school anymore, just hanging out in Berkeley, California.
So was there a time where you're like, okay, I gotta get real. I gotta, not only for my parents, but I don't want to drive them crazy. I gotta find a way to make my way in this world and get paid.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they influenced me a lot because they're my parents, of course. And there was a time where I thought, I'm really awesome at music. I'm going to just like start all of a sudden playing rock music. And I'm going to be great at that too because I'm so good at music. And I wasn't actually. It turned out I had this really clear set of goals for myself in rock music and other kinds of music, and they weren't quite working out. After a couple of years, I thought, maybe this isn't the best idea after all. But then once you're a musician, it's hard to stop being a musician because you have music in you. So that was the conflict that I experienced for quite a while and still experience.
was there a
I
turning
mean,
point where you're like, okay, now I gotta I'm, such and such age, I gotta make stuff happen. And that's when you put it into maybe overdrive and say, all right, I'll still do music on the side, but now I gotta really get things going because maybe I want to get married, have kids, have a family, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're exactly right. At a certain point, I started to have friends who had actual jobs and had like things like new cars. I had no money ever and never had an actual job. And I thought, I could have done that, couldn't I? And then there was a point where I met my now wife. We moved to California. I was going to go back to programming. We didn't. We moved to New York, kept on doing the arts together. And I was getting older. And again, we had neighbors who didn't always respect us, especially in New York City. We couldn't afford to live in nice places. And there were those who respected us and those who didn't. I kept thinking, did I miss the boat here completely on being a computer programmer or something? So then we had a child, and I thought, oh wow, this is really okay. I got to do something here. So my wife is actually still a theater director, and she's really great. She runs a theater company in New Jersey and does wonderful things for the community and for the arts. And she's doing that side of things in the family now, and I'm less involved in music, although I'm still involved in music. But I'm kind of the person who got the actual job after a while. Not that her job is not an actual job. I'm the one who got the more conventional job.
You walk us through the experience of kind of rediscovering coding and programming and getting back into tech? Because it seems like throughout your
Yeah.
career, you've, done it part time, got in full time. You've moved around from startup to startup. Kind of share that how that worked out for you.
Yeah, it was a really rocky path. There was not a direct path from A to B. Now that I'm here, it feels like there was one, and the bio implies that there was, but there were a lot of times where I thought I could never ever do this. Many, many times over a course of many years. So as a kid, I was obsessed with computers. I just loved computers. I loved programming. I thought it was the coolest thing. I was just that kind of kid. And then at a certain point in high school, that stopped being the case. And I got the computer science degree and I kind of liked writing code, but it wasn't as fun anymore for me. So when I dropped that, good. I'm actually supposed to be a musician, not a programmer. But then I remember being a music professor for the brief time that I was a music professor and looking at websites. I'd made a site for my band a couple years before that, so I knew HTML a little bit of CSS, but I was looking at these things in these sites, I didn't know what they were. And looking at this stuff I would see when I saw view source, and I thought, I'm missing out on all this stuff that's changing in the world. And, I'm missing the boat here completely in this. So I wanted to get back into it, and eventually did quit, as I said before, my professor job and got part-time jobs coding. And it was just hard to find a job at all at first, even a part-time job. I finally, my wife being a good writer, wrote me a really great like letter that got me a job at a startup, which honestly shouldn't have hired me, but they did. I just learned PHP and then some JavaScript and more CSS just by working there because I could pick things up on the fly. And then from there, I was able to get other kinds of jobs like that. But there was lots of dead ends. I applied for lots of jobs that were startups, which were just like terrible. A couple of guys, there's always a couple of guys like in an apartment somewhere working on some strange project and not paying very much or anything. And there are a lot of dead ends along the way. I finally I had just learned how to get like the right kind of jobs, the right kinds of people, so I could learn skills that would get me, feel like I was actually a programmer again. I didn't know if I could do it anymore, honestly, for a long time. And it turned out that actually I ended up at Google, so it turned out it was possible. But yeah, I think it just took a lot of like most things I've experienced in life, a lot of trying things, sometimes succeeding, often failing, sometimes even giving up, and then a couple of days later saying, "Well, I could try that again."
Well, but that non-traditional route, how did you get into Google? Because from my understanding, it's super hard to get in there, and you probably
Yeah,
didn't have the background that a lot of other people had.
yeah, it's pretty surprising that I got in there at all. I think the key with this was that at some point I realized that there were these recruiters out there looking for programmers of any kind. And when I figured that out, I put my resume out into the recruiter areas. And then I had to figure out that a lot of recruiters were kind of sketchy. That was somebody across the world finding some sort of listing somewhere else and saying, I have this part-time job, and not to make fun of New Jersey where I live, in Jersey City or in somewhere, some other non-tech hub place where you can make a small salary doing something kind of random. Find the right recruiters, work with them, and kind of like leverage recruiters to, I've interviewed at these places over here. I tell other recruiters these things, they want to be interested in me, and just kind of build on things like that. And then build on finally like small salary offers to get better salary offers and to get a job at the New York Times 2012, which was a real programming job. Then when I left there, I worked at AOL for a year. And yeah, again, recruiters just found me again. And I had applied for a job at Google once before as software engineer, and I did not make it. It turns out a lot of people who were there apply a few times before they actually get in. I know one guy who's really a central part of the developer advocate team there who applied probably 4 or 5 times and kept on failing. Finally, he applied again and he got a job. Once you're in, you're in. So I think for me, it's a matter of finding the job I was most qualified for, where I wasn't the most super programmer in the world. I didn't know all the stuff that people knew, but I knew a lot of stuff. And I could show that I could solve problems. And I also had some people skills I developed over the years, which I did not come to the world with really. I learned doing music and other kinds of things, skills about getting projects done, being ambitious about difficult projects, working with people, talking with people. I think that combination of things was enough to get me the job.
That makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like on Blind, I certainly see folks tend to start with a goal and they almost go through their career trying to get through like a checklist in terms of,
Mhm.
oh, well, if I build up these skills, or if I earn these titles, or if I have these, certifications or names on my resume, that's my way of unlocking the negative, the biggest, the next best thing, which for some folks might be Google. But it seems like no, if it's actually about your hard skills, your interest, finding that right role, then these great things can naturally happen, perhaps.
That's my opinion now. It wasn't before, but yeah, I can't tell people how to do things because I've done things myself in ways that are quite circuitous. They've worked out sometimes, which is nice. But I was the same way. I was like, I'm gonna have a goal. I'm gonna be like a great composer. I would go to libraries and see like here's Beethoven's works, here's Bach's works, all in these books, and think that's going to be me. I know how to do it. I have these 5 steps I'm going to take to get to that point. It didn't really work out at all. Like I did some good stuff in music. I had some successes, but in general, it wasn't what I wanted in the end. Like I was playing in other people's bands and played them on some big albums and had some successes in my own bands and wrote some pretty good music, but I wasn't like a stunning composer, I didn't think. And then I thought, well, maybe that was the wrong idea after all. And when I got to back to programming, I just thought I'm just going to do what I can do well and see what people around me want me to do more things and find what they think I can do for them and what I also enjoy doing. It's like I enjoy doing these things. People want these things. Here's the intersection. So just kind of doing things well, I think, and then keep my eyes open for new opportunities. So at Google, when I got there, I realized after a while that I was not like in the most blessed part of the company. Even in 2014, Google, well, there were places where it was like the Google everyone knows, where people were independent and free and pursued their passion projects, and a Google of hierarchy and assignments. I was more in the second one than the first one. I was somewhere in between. And I thought if I just do things that are pretty good and then kind of keep my eyes open for other opportunities and people might discover what I'm doing, it's possible that they'll help me get other jobs at Google, which is how I got to do other more glorified jobs at Google from where I was.
Now,
But I had
is
no
it
plan.
something? Yeah, I mean, on that point, is it something about these large organizations where kind of the reality is different from the perception, right? Because I mean, to your point, it seems like, oh wow, like this is the Google that we read about in all those like amazing news articles. And then your lived experience was maybe a bit more realistic or a bit more gritty, we could even say. Is there
I
something to that? Or
mean, all places have, all organizations have more or less exciting places, and Google's like that too. It was a pretty cool place. I was thinking about something else just now. I forgot what it was. Oh, the analogy also that I thought I was in the driver's seat before, but I think I'm a little more in the passenger seat of the ride, doing the best that I can with things and trying to do things well. And with music also, I'm trying to be a singer-songwriter again, which is a crazy idea. It makes no sense, but I want to do it, so I'm trying to do it. Back to your question about Google, I think it's also the case that people who want to find people for joining their teams, finding a good person is pretty hard. So if you can be the person who has what they want, even if your background's a bit different, if they see that in you, that's pretty exciting because you can look for a person for a job for 6 months, not find that person at all.
mean, I know you're not at Google, but I want to pick your brain on this.
Sure.
What is that matching process like? You mentioned that a team has to go find you. Um, I would think that you interview and that's the team that you're going to be on. Is it something different?
I don't know how it is anymore. I haven't really interviewed for, I mean, I interviewed for a job in 2014 there, and interviewed other people for jobs at Google for a long time too. And that kind of died off a couple of years ago as layoffs happened and other things. We were hiring less. I'm not sure how it's done now. I know that when I was involved in people knowing, I'm knowing people that were looking for people and trying to hire engineers, other people, they look for people with certain kinds of skill sets out there, certain kinds of backgrounds. You look at someone's resume and you try to tell what they've done before, of course. You can't tell how they are as a person really at all. And try to judge what their experience is like. And then finding a person with the right experience can be pretty hard to do. Like, for example, people were hiring folks to work on Chrome as engineers, or even people as engineering managers on Chrome, especially. Finding a person who's been a manager of a browser engineering team before is pretty hard. So you look for things that are parallel, similar experiences of some sort. But also at Google, it's probably still the case. There are a lot of engineers there, of course. So it would be the case for you to apply for a general engineering job sometimes, and they would then match you with the team afterwards, figuring that if you're a good programmer, you could work almost anywhere at Google, whether you know Python, whether you know JavaScript, whether you know something else. You could pick up other kinds of things. I know now that hiring people for machine learning jobs is pretty competitive. And in most places, at least, without prior experience working a job or actually doing things in the world, like, running an open source machine learning project or running a startup yourself or being, a person involved in doing that specifically, it's harder to get a job there because everybody wants those jobs.
So Ben, how did you then segue to being a product manager?
Happened because I was a developer advocate, which I really enjoyed in general, although it was pretty grueling. I did a lot of traveling, which was, I thought, really eye-opening and exciting. And I was doing pretty well. I got promoted twice in that job, and it was going nicely. Again, it was a lot of work. In 2020, I had a big plan to take these conferences all around the world, and I actually had booked a three-city tour of Pakistan with people I'd met there, booked events in Sri Lanka and somewhere else, also quite interesting. And then people began discussing the strange virus that was happening, and I recruited people to go
Hmm.
with me, and they started saying, "I don't want to travel right about now." And then like a week later, of course, everything stopped. So my tickets to Pakistan never got used. And I started doing events at home from this area over here, from this room. So I was running these learning events where I would just like work with Google developer groups, which are these groups around the world that Google sponsors of people who want to learn things, and Google developer experts, and work with them to run various like training programs. And it went really well. People seemed to like them. We got great feedback on them. But I would talk to all these people and we chat about their lives and programming and other things, and turn off the camera and be myself again in this room. And I realized that I thought I wasn't really involved in things anymore that really were changing the world in some positive way. Wanted to do that somehow. And I thought, well, okay, if I could work in climate change maybe or something else like healthcare, that would be nice. But I don't want to be an engineer in those kinds of jobs. What could I do that I would be able to do? And developer advocate jobs I saw around Google weren't jobs I was interested in except for my job. And other companies, developer advocate jobs, more like working for a new blockchain company. Did not want to get involved in cryptocurrency. And so I thought, wait, I always wanted to be a product manager. Maybe I should be a product manager. I've always wanted to try that, but I was afraid of it because I really work very long hours. Okay, meetings all day and work all night. I talked to a couple of friends of mine who were PMs, and they said, no, if you do it right, you can kind of do it in 40 hours a week. So it's possible to have a normal life and be a product manager. I decided to try it out. And at Google, what you can do is you can have a rotation in another job if you can find a team that wants you to try it out. So you can just your team can sponsor the headcount for you to move to a different team for 3 or 6 months, or perhaps a new team will sponsor your headcount. And you can try out a different job for a little while, and then you actually have the leverage to then apply for that job or a similar job because you've experienced the job. So I wanted to get a job as a product manager at a rotator. I couldn't find anything for a while, but I really persisted. Still couldn't find anything because everyone else wanted to do what I was doing. A lot of folks wanted to be product managers, it turned out. finally, actually, I knew a director who was a friend, and I talked to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you talked to so and so, so and so, and so and so. They'll find you something." And so they did immediately. So I had experience on the web already, and became a rotator on Chrome. Did that for 6 months. Worked out pretty well, it seemed like. Then I went through the interview process for a product manager at Google, which was to me insanely complicated and difficult. I studied for it for about 6 weeks. Didn't do much else but that. I did 15 practice interviews, probably, maybe 20 practice interviews. And then I passed the interviews and was able to get a job as a product manager. So I thought, this is great. I'm a product manager now. I have this wonderful job.
But I understand at Google, the product manager interviews are quite technical, right? So you're often going through system design and architecture, even in some roles. So I imagine your background as an engineer, as a coder, probably helped in that regard, where perhaps other external candidates would have had a harder time. Perhaps they don't have that skill set or that experience on those schema.
It helped for Chrome. For other jobs, it might not be quite as important. There's a book about this, how to apply for product manager jobs. I think it's called Cracking the PM Interview. This is the exact book you'd have to use to study for a Google, Meta, Apple, some product manager job. Yeah, certain kinds of questions. There's like a certain kind of art to what you have to do and persona you have to take on during the questions. I found it to be an interesting exercise to learn how to do this, answer questions in certain kinds of ways. They ask a question like, improve healthcare. You don't just say, well, I don't know, I could do this. I could maybe like have, I don't know, socialized medical care, have doctors have, more empathy or something. You have to think through this problem in detail, analyze it in certain ways, think about user segments and do like a 10-minute long answer. But then you have some sort of product you could build as a product manager at a certain company, as a certain person to make this happen. It's quite a process. It took me a while to learn this process. But one of the interviews does involve technical knowledge, but it's kind of light on technical knowledge. And some folks who have had no programming background were able to pass this interview and do a good enough job at other interviews that they could say, well, obviously they don't really understand load balancing that well, but they're probably good enough to have a product manager job at this particular position. So I say the answer to that question is it helps to have a technical background more than most companies, but not as much as one might think it would. Like the New York Times, product managers had to have an MBA, I think, and didn't have to have any kind of technical background. That may have changed since I was there. At Google, an MBA will help you in certain areas, but not all areas.
It's interesting because from a layman's perspective, I would look at you and think you would be a perfect fit, and your whole background really kind of built up to this. Because, and Rick, tell me if you feel this too. I spoke to Ben a couple of times. He has this way about him that's very humble, but he's very articulate. He comes across as a nice guy. He comes across as someone who
I
could
appreciate that.
schmoozing well. And I'd imagine for a product manager, that's kind of ideal, right? Because you have to, let's say Rick is the engineer, you got to be able to work with him, and then you got to work with the marketing people, and then you got to work with these other people. So it seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but from an outside perspective, that seems to be a big part of it, to have that ability, that flexibility, the communication skills, the social skills to make it work. And you kind of have that. And you don't, and also you don't come across like this big ego guy either. So you could make people feel comfortable around you. So to me, even though when you gave your career arc and it seems a little like winding, it all kind of makes sense where it comes together, where you've picked up all these skills, all these tools to bring you where you are now. Does that make
My
sense?
hope.
Does that, right? Rick, does that
It's
make
my hope.
sense? It's like, it's from a non-techie perspective. Does that sound realistic?
When I made my resume up for product managers looking for a job recently, I started putting in after a while things like my music activities because I spent a lot of time working on basically music startups, like against incredible odds, trying to think where's a good product market fit for what we're going to do over here. How do we make this musical or this band? I think people are going to want to actually, pay money to see or have an audience for. But like you said, I think when I got to Google, one of my goals was to develop other kinds of skills and develop more of my people side.
Mhm.
And I think I've gotten better at that sort of thing. Like I wasn't very good at explaining technical concepts to non-technical people. I didn't have the kinds of flexibility I have now, but I worked with people in sales for a couple of years and I admired the way that they were able to not sell you stuff. They were able to understand how products worked explain to the clients, if you do remarketing, you might see $4 million extra a year. So maybe you should try this thing. And it was more of like a, a show that you must do this. And they're extroverted, of course, or tried to be extroverted. But yeah, I tried to learn some people skills, I guess. And I feel like this is more for me self-actualizing, trying to use some of the skills. Arguably, I was more suited for being a developer advocate in certain ways because that involves more performance. When I got on stage, at first I couldn't give talks at all, but I learned that it was not unlike beginning a performance. Although when you're discussing code, you're not like, everybody, you must go do this thing. Everyone run, and whatever, grab this flag and wave it in the air. It's more about trying to explain code, but still I don't know, being aware of the audience and being with them all the time and following them and bringing them along with you. I think those things are all helpful in talks in general.
I mean, for folks who might not have the kind of traditional background and want to get into product management, you've mentioned that different industries or different companies have different kind of almost profiles for what it takes to be a product manager or what they might prefer to hire. Do you have any tips in terms of how to, let's say I'm a product manager, how do I kind of self-identify or how do I find those industries or those companies where, you know, um, there'd be a mutual fit there?
That's a really important question, and I wish I had a better answer for you than what I'm going to say. Because a lot of folks ask me this question on LinkedIn. My post went viral. I got 5 million, 6 million views. People started saying, I want to be a product manager. How do I do that? And I thought, I have no idea because I just kept trying to do it until I was doing it, but I didn't really have a background in being a product manager. If I'd applied at a different company to be a product manager, they would have said no because I had no experience at it. I had to get experience at it to get a job. And even then, when I applied for jobs as a product manager, it was pretty hard to find one. I had to really, really persist in order to find my job at Zocdoc. But what I can say is the kind of the obvious and dumb thing is that, like I just said a minute ago, prior experience helps you get hired. So if you've managed a product in some way, it's helpful. So for example, one problem I had in my interviews is that at Chrome, we didn't launch very much because Chrome is very cautious and very big. We weren't changing Chrome all the time every couple of minutes. Changes were very gradual. So I ended up pulling back to prior experience at other jobs at Google or even other places where I had done things that were like found there was a product need of some sort and helped design a product of some sort, and some other job at Google or prior jobs and gotten things done as a product manager would get done. And I think that also, like you were saying, also like Jack, it's kind of thing where if you have a certain kind of people skills, people want that a lot. They want to see how you can, yeah, you can have a certain kind of authority about you, hopefully. Maybe this shouldn't be important, but it often is, and have the ability to communicate with people across different kinds of areas and bring folks together in a coalition. So people from different areas of a company can all agree to do the same thing and all align on what's important. And I guess it's supposed to involve a lot of analytical skills also in analyzing situations and figuring out what should be done given what there is. And there are certainly skills to that. But of course, it's hard to show you have those skills if you can't get an interview in the first place. So I think prior experience, unfortunately, is the best way to get a product manager job.
Right. And but that could also be, to your point, not necessarily experience having been a product manager, but in that industry, in that discipline, in terms of just almost having that awareness of what the product does or what the market is out there, or the understanding of the like target customer segment even.
Yeah, knowing what users might want who are, I mean, in tech, knowing the market, knowing the companies and the players out there now, knowing the current trends, what's happening. I mean, the obvious things like, oh, AI is a thing now, but even beyond that, like, why is it a thing? Where will that matter? When will it matter? And thinking about, oh yeah, LLMs, chatbots, but of course, that's the thing that's happening now. In 2 years, might be a whole different thing that's the craze in AI. Probably will be, because everyone's working on this now. So those things all matter. And then a certain kind of persona, I guess, is what matters. The people aren't well suited for the job because they don't have the kind of persona. They don't want to be in lots of meetings with people. They want to write up long documents. You have to want to do certain kinds of things and be, I guess, be in the world as a certain kind of person, which maybe is a goal for all of us in our lives, is be a certain kind of person as we go about our lives and be some version of our best selves in the world.
Now, this might be, a little touchy subject, but we've seen so many layoffs since mid 2022 to now, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, you were, part of a layoff, and
By the way, I was not laid off.
so what happened? Oh yeah, so you just,
Everyone thought I
I'm
was laid
sorry.
off after I made my post, but I quit. I wasn't laid
Oh,
off.
gotcha. Oh, so
It
that's
could have happened
interesting.
sooner or later, certainly. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was me next, but I never got laid off.
Oh, so that's interesting. So what made you decide to say, hey, all right, I want to start a new chapter somewhere else?
I'd wanted to for a couple of years, but I just thought for a couple of years that, well, so I wanted to do things that were good for the world, and my personality hadn't been the kind of like a large multinational company kind of personality, but Google made that for me and other people I knew possible because we thought we could do good things for the world at Google. We thought we could, for example, at Google, help the web be good for people. And Google, I think, has been doing that to a large extent, has been promoting good content, good user experiences, faster websites, secure websites. It's done those kinds of things for the web because it's important for Google, the web be good, because Google makes money off of web ads. You could work at a job there just making the web better. So a lot of folks like me were there for that reason. I felt like after a while, I couldn't do that as much. I was able to, in 2018 and 19, be part of bringing these mini conferences to places like developing countries like Pakistan, Kenya, even places like Brazil, other places to help people understand how to build websites that were faster and more performant. And that involved some things for Google that maybe were more ambiguous, but there also was the positive. I was able to use Google's funding to bring the conferences to these places where people really needed faster websites, where people had 2G connections sometimes or sub 2G connections and these cheaper Huawei phones that weren't that fast. When I couldn't do those things anymore, I started to wonder why I was at Google, if I could be involved in things that were some way better for the world. So I was thinking about this. I also was thinking, I've been here for a while, Google's getting kind of bigger and maybe more ambiguously good or bad for the universe or the world. At my 10th anniversary, I should probably leave. And then last year, layoff happened. And that made the decision much easier because people's morale really changed at Google. I mean, I think it's changed quite a bit for a lot of people because people before, like me, we saw Google as a place we could realize our own ambitions and our own goals. And the structure of Google was such that for most of us, it was supposed to be about building your own career and building your own self. By doing that, you'd be doing things for the company as well. By accomplishing important things that were impactful for the company's goals, you were also building yourself up. That kind of changed, and people started to see their jobs at Google as more transitory. They were told things like promotions will be harder now because we already have enough people that are L6 or L7 or L8. So promotions will be more scarce in the future. People started to say, well, I guess I'll work here as a job instead of I'll work here as like my dream project. That I think changed the calculus for a lot of people. I began looking around that time for something else to do. I also could tell that as a PM at Google, I couldn't really change jobs anymore within Google because there were layoffs and people wanted to be PMs anyway. I couldn't go on finding new jobs at Google. I wanted to actually get involved in Google Health, and that was really impossible. And I wanted to get involved in Jigsaw, and they got lots of layoffs. And it was clear that my own job wasn't going to really change over the years from what I was doing. And it wasn't really, it also became the thing where everyone at Google thought, I'm so important. Google hired me, I get free food, my manager lets me do whatever I want to do within a lot of constraints, or maybe no constraints sometimes. Like I'm an important person to Google. Google cares that I'm here. It became more like, well, actually, I am expendable after all, which was true before because Google has a lot of employees. Most people give you a place with someone else eventually. You felt more like you were just an employee at a company, which is not a bad thing. It's a good company in general to work for, I think. You get lots of nice stuff still, but it wasn't what it was before. So those of us who had seen what it was before felt sad about the change. Of course, when I got there already, it was a pretty old company. I'm sure 10 years prior, it was quite different than what it was when I got there. But yeah, that was a long answer and kind of a personal story, but a lot of us just believed in Google as an idea and believed it was a good thing, even though it was a very large company and a profit-oriented company. And people still believe that in some cases. Not everyone does, as a choice the executives made to do to try to, to please the stockholders more, to get a higher profit margin, and to risk the employees' morale changing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to kind of look back throughout your entire career, was there a particular kind of promotion that you're most proud of that was the most challenging to earn, and how did you earn that?
The product manager job was the hardest thing I ever did. That was super hard. And I got lucky in some ways that I was able to keep my current level when I made the transition and not get down level, which often happens. But that was a big deal. I think though I was most successful there probably as a developer advocate. I thought I was pretty good at that. I learned to give talks and run conferences and run things. And I got promoted there a couple of times and like it was going pretty well. Although I felt again at that job, there are people there much better than I was because there are people there who are developer advocates who are like the best JavaScript programmers in the world were there. They're always making these incredible tools and inventing these things, inventing new libraries and like image compression tools like Squoosh.app and things like Preact and these big things. Or like my manager there had invented jQuery UI. His manager is maybe the world's most famous and most well-known performance expert. People would ask me to like get his autograph or ask me to introduce them to him. Some folks 100,000 Twitter followers or more, and some of them are still big deals on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I felt like I was not the best developer advocate, but I was doing pretty well at what I was doing there. All those folks have left though. I think most of the ones that were the big like Twitter superstars have left. People that are there now are still really excellent, but it's become more of a conventional job where they do important things for the web, but they're not like I'm a big celebrity on Twitter. Look at me.
I mean, looking through the kind of jungle gym of your career, is there any kind of theme or advice that you want to share on to the folks that are listening to the podcast right now?
I love the phrase jungle gym that you just used. I'm thinking about that. What would you actually say? I'm not sure I have a really good idea for you. I have some half-formed ideas. What would you say?
Let's hear them.
Looking for you to give me a little bit of a start here. Uh,
Yeah.
Well, all right, I'll give you a jump start. So you try different things to see what works.
yeah.
You've kind of iterated to try music, to try to be in a band, to be a developer, and keep finding your purpose and what finds something meaningful and fulfillment for you. And it seems that's kind of one of the arcs I'm finding out from your career. And even the way why you felt that you need to leave is because you weren't feeling fulfilled and going after a bigger purpose. So I don't know if that helps kind of ushers
Yeah, that
you.
does help actually. I guess I'm lucky because most people in the world haven't got the luxury to just like change jobs again and again. They've got
Yeah.
to support themselves and support their families, and be able to live. Unfortunately, I was brought up middle class, and then I was able to keep on going for a while on small salaries because I lived cheaply for a long time. I guess for me, yeah, you're right. If I don't keep on learning, I just can't keep on doing what I'm doing. I can't make myself do it. And there's a lot of honor in getting a job somewhere. It's a stable job and being able to support yourself and support your family and having a good life that way. And be people that can do that and be those who have caught up on all the latest TV shows and movies also and have a lot of leisure time. I just can't do it. I've tried. I mean, I have to keep on always trying new things. And for me, what's so exciting is getting into a world where I don't know what's going on at all. And I have to figure out what's going on and figure out how to do things like one thing I love about my developer advocate job is that I got to be a developer advocate in August 2017. And after a week or so, my manager, Paul Bacco, said, hey, there's this conference in Poland happening, Google Developer Days. I can't do it. You want to go there and give a talk for 1,000 people in Poland, like in 3 or 4 weeks? And I said, yes, I do.
Mhm.
I did
Wow.
it, and it could have been better, but it was good enough, and I got better at it. And there was this trust people had, just people just try things and do things. So for me, I love to just jump in and try something new, which can be terrifying. Actually, can be something which is not as glamorous. Like I sang songs in public for a long time. Didn't like how I was doing it very much. I stopped doing it, and I came back to it in the last like year. I took vocal lessons for 3 years, and I 2 months ago did my first like solo show. I learned again how to play piano and sing and play guitar and sing songs in a different kind of way. I brought this to a small cafe here in Little Falls, New Jersey. I was terrified. I was just thinking, why did I do this? They're gonna think I'm an idiot. They're gonna hate me. They're gonna laugh at me the entire time. But I wanted to do it. and got there. It could have been better, but they didn't laugh at me or hate me. There were some good things that happened. It was a good stepping stone, and for me, that was just a valuable experience. That throwing myself in there again, even though it's not really for any obvious career purpose. I want to be able to do this thing. This would be a good thing to be able to do for the world and for me, or for whatever reason. So that's the way that I do it. I'm not saying it's a good way to do it for anybody else. I'm just saying that for me, constant learning and constantly trying new things, spending my like non-work hours also doing the same stuff is just how I do it. Don't know why.
Well, I mean, I might not know why either, but it seems to have worked. And I really appreciate that reminder of courage, that it can be the little things that can build into huge things that can propel your entire career. So thanks for coming on the
Yeah.
show, Ben.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for all your interesting questions and your own insights. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much. This was great. This is
Thanks.
awesome.